So from a real rate point of view, which according to RBI's last report 1.4 to 1.9, is there any space for a real rate point of view? And also wanted to know whether implicit in the assumption behind to the decision was there is no trade deal with US. Was it also a consideration? That very unlikely a trade
No,
deal?
that's not a consideration. See, as I mentioned to you, ours is mostly a domestic demand-led economy, and whatever is the impact of the tariffs, higher tariffs, that has been already included in our projections. So it is not on account of the higher tariffs. It's a totality of things that we look at. Space, as I again mentioned, it will depend going forward, will be data driven as to whether there is further need, scope, first of all scope, and then whether there is a need. All I can say is that going forward we expect benign inflation, and so if the inflation continues to be the way it is, we expect the rates, the policy rates, to be low and not high. Whether now what rate it will be, that will be getting into speculation. But going forward, we expect benign inflation, and so we do expect low policy repo rates rather than higher policy repo rates.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I will now invite Vishwanath Nair of NDTV Profit to ask his question.
Good afternoon, Governor. The comments on rupee that you made, we don't want to target levels, step in when volatility. Has that threshold of stepping in changed at all? As in, is there a point in the volatility where you're saying, okay, this much volatility is fine because it's the market forces at play, but beyond this is where we'll step in? And the second part to that is then this historically low inflation and blistering growth doesn't seem to be felt on the ground level. So I'm just trying to understand where the dissonance is. People on the ground not feeling the inflation come down that much, nor that the pace of growth is as fast as it is.
I don't know. I mean, where do you get this? Because we do rely on the numbers that are given out. I think there is a good growth. Inflation is certainly very low. And especially if you take out precious metals, I think it is being felt on ground as well. Of course, there can be, because there is a geographical distribution to it. Some states it's lower inflation, some states it's higher. The consumption basket again, of various sectors, segments of society is different. So there can be, differential realization, but on the whole, inflation has certainly, come down. You look at historically, it used to be about 7% and 5%, and now, it's even much lower. So inflation has come down. Growth, of course, if you look at the improvement in the living standards of people, that has certainly, over the years, it has improved. So undeniably, I think it's being felt on the ground. It's a very hard, your first question is very hard, to put a formula or as to how, it's more an art than a science over there, and so that's what we try to do in managing.
Has your tolerance increased of the volatility? That's the core of the question.
The definition of volatility.
For me, it has remained the same, and I think even for the RBI, I don't find that there is much of a change. We'll have to see, as to one can go back and look at the numbers and calculate for oneself as to whether volatility the number is there. One can calculate what the volatility has been there, and you can find out, if the volatility index, VIX or whatever, you calculate, you can calculate it and find out as to whether volatility has actually increased or decreased over the years. But we don't think that there has been any conscious attempt to change our tolerance to volatility.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Swati Bhatt Shetty of Thomson Reuters to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Governor, today you've reiterated multiple times that inflation, the underlying pressures on inflation are really low. I just wanted to understand what are these factors? I mean, yes, food prices down, precious metals like you mentioned, but is the consumer demand also not picking up, particularly in urban areas? Is that also leading to low inflation? And secondly, related to that, are we also feeling, the spillover effect of the Chinese overcapacity kind of leading in? It's happening in other Asian economies. Are you also feeling that in India? And also, is such low inflation really a good thing for an emerging economy? 0.25% is really low. We are way below 2% as well. So is this the right level of inflation for an economy like India? Thank you.
Certainly not. I mean, 0.2 is not the right level of inflation. We target 4%, and so, it's that kind of an inflation that we try to achieve. At the same time, I don't think we should be, looking at really, 0.2%, because there are going to be fluctuations. There is going to be volatility in markets, whether it is forex markets. Vishwanath asked that question, or whether, it is the Sensex, stock markets, or whether it is prices in general, that volatility will be there, and, some of the impacts are also, because of the base effects. Earlier, you had very high food inflation, and so now, because of the base effects, it seems to be low. But underlying inflation, as we have said, is certainly, on the lower side, and that's why we gave this rate cut.
So consumer demand and the Chinese deflationary pressures, can you please?
Yeah, I mean, all these things, it's both the supply and the demand side factors, and both of them are at play. One can't, and it will be, sector to sector, it will depend. So if it is food, it's more, the supply side factors. It's not, so much the demand side factors. And so it will depend, on sector to sector. There cannot be, one answer as to whether it is only demand or only supply, or which one is more. I think it's a combination of both demand and supply factors. And because there are demand side factors as well, that's why we have reduced the repo rate. We have been, in an easing cycle to further support demand.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite Piyush Shukla of Hindu Business Line to ask his question.
Yeah, good afternoon, Governor, DGs. So two questions. First is on your rate cut. You mentioned about transmission happening. Banks are caught in a fix because there's increasing competition on deposit growth that is there. CASA, there is a challenge to build. Do you feel today's rate cut will translate into lowering of deposit rate as well? That is one. Second is on the annual report that had come out. It had mentioned about gold.
This is Kapil. Kapil thinks burnout is for other people. Tasks का overload, caffeine का overdose. घर हो या बाहर, Kapil always says yes for one more. Until body ने बोला, बस, अब no more. That's when Kapil realized दुनिया भर के hustle से पहले health insurance लेना smart है. Star Health Insurance, India's most trusted health insurance company. Insure now.
Good to have all your gold, at one place. So there is certainly a diversification effort that is behind, this move. What was your first question? Sorry.
Will today's rate cut in
depositors?
Terms of, yes.
See, we have to be looking at the real interest rates. When inflation is so low, and going forward also, it's going to be low. Then even though the nominal interest rates may seem to be low, the real interest rates today are quite high. So that's true not only for borrowers but also for savers. And so we do expect that going forward, especially after this repo rate cut, deposit rates will to some extent moderate.
Thank you, sir. We'll have some questions from the left side again. I'll now request Ekta Suri of Zee Business to ask a question.
Good afternoon, sir.
सर मेरा सवाल होने वाला है कि अगर बहुत सारे मंच पर हमने सुना कि सेबी चीफ ने ये कहा कि बैंक्स जो है उन्हें नॉन एग्री कमोडिटी डेरिवेटिव्स का हिस्सा बनना चाहिए, तो क्या इसके लिए बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन में आने वाले दिनों में क्या कोई बदलाव हो सकता है? ऐसा मुमकिन है? क्योंकि उन्होंने एक से ज्यादा प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर इस बात को कई बार कहा। और दूसरा ये सर कि विदेशी बैंक्स में फॉरेन निवेश आ रहा है, तो पीएसयू बैंक्स में आपको लगता है कि जो एफडीआई की लिमिट है वो 20% से ज्यादा होनी चाहिए ताकि वहां पर भी विदेशी निवेश आए और कहीं ना कहीं पीएसयू बैंक्स भी जो है और उनकी रोबस्टनेस में वृद्धि हो?
पहला प्रश्न आपका है ऑन
कि क्या बैंक्स जो है वो निवेश कर सकते हैं नॉन एग्री कमोडिटी?
सेबी ने जो प्रस्ताव भेजा है वो अभी प्रस्ताव हमारे पास में अभी हाल ही में आया है और उसका हम अध्ययन करेंगे, लेकिन आपको ये मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन अधिनियम के तहत इस प्रकार की गतिविधियों में बैंक को सम्मिलित होना वो वर्जित है, वो अलाउड नहीं है आज के दिन में। तो इसमें कानून में संशोधन होना पड़ेगा। ये केवल एक रेगुलेटरी मुद्दा तक ही सीमित नहीं है। दूसरी बात, पूर्व में भी इस प्रकार का प्रस्ताव आया था, तब इसका परीक्षण किया गया था और तब इसे उचित नहीं समझा गया था। क्या अब इन 8-9 वर्षों में कोई स्थिति में बदलाव हुआ है, इसका हम अध्ययन करेंगे। उचित नहीं होगा कि मैं आपको कोई उत्तर बिना उसका प्रोज एंड कॉन्स का अध्ययन किए हुए मैं आपको दूं।
बट सर अभी अध्ययन वाली स्टेट तक
नहीं, अभी हाल ही में यह प्रस्ताव आया है, तो इसलिए ये उचित नहीं होगा कि हम आपका इसके ऊपर में कोई आपको मैं रिस्पांस आपको दूं।
और सर एफडीआई लिमिट जो पीएसयू बैंक्स में
20% के आसपास है, उसमें क्या, क्योंकि प्राइवेट बैंक्स में पैसा आ रहा है।
ये जो मुद्दा है ये भारत सरकार के क्षेत्राधिकार में है कि क्या उन्हें ये उचित लगता है कि 20% से इसे बढ़ाना चाहिए या नहीं बढ़ाना चाहिए। तो इसके ऊपर भी मैं कोई टिप्पणी करना अभी उचित नहीं समझता।
धन्यवाद सर। आई विल नाउ रिक्वेस्ट अनुराग शाह ऑफ ईटी नाउ स्वदेश टू आस्क हिज क्वेश्चन।
थैंक यू सर। सर सबसे पहले तो बधाई सर, आप 1 साल पूरा कर रहे हैं। 125 बेसिस पॉइंट की हमने कटौती देखी और आम लोगों को उम्मीद होगी कि आगे भी ये जारी रहेगी। सर मेरा सवाल है सर 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ा हुआ सवाल।
डिपॉजिटर्स के लिए इंटरेस्ट रेट्स बढ़ते रहेंगे और लेंडर्स के लिए इंटरेस्ट रेट्स कम होते रहेंगे।
यस सर।
होना चाहिए, एफिशिएंसीज बढ़नी चाहिए बैंक्स की भी निश्चित रूप से।
यस सर। सर मेरा सवाल सर 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ा हुआ है। इन दिनों काफी चर्चा में 81 बॉन्ड, कई सारी सरकारी बैंक के 81 बॉन्ड से पैसा जुड़ा रही है और कई सारे निवेशक सामने आए हैं हमने जिन्होंने शिकायत की है कि एक मामले में उनका पैसा शून्य हो गया। और सर वहां पर हमने देखा है कि इंश्योरेंस रेगुलेटर IRDA के द्वारा भी RBI को एक पत्र लिखा गया था। IRDA के चीफ ने कहा कि ये इस फैसले से जो इंश्योरेंस कंपनियां, लाइफ इंश्योरेंस कंपनियों का जो काफी नुकसान हुआ है और उसमें आम लोगों का पैसा था, तो उस पे सर RBI का क्या कहना है? और जो आम निवेशक है उन्होंने कई बार कहा है कि मिस सेलिंग की वजह से हमारा जो पूरी जिंदगी भर की पूंजी थी वो शून्य हो गई और ऐसी कोई कठोर कार्रवाई नहीं की गई है। और RBI ने भी कहा था कि हम कुछ गाइडलाइंस लेके आएंगे 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ी हुई रिटेल निवेशकों के लिए। और सर जब मिस सेलिंग होती है बैंकों के जरिए और 81 बॉन्ड के अलावा हम दूसरी चीजें भी देखें तो बैंकों के जरिए जो क्रेडिट लिंक प्रोडक्ट बेचे जाते हैं, बंडल्ड प्रोडक्ट जिसमें लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस वगैरह, वो बाकी विश्व भर के करीब 38-40 देश है वहां पर रेगुलेटेड है या फिर बैन है। तो क्या आपको लगता है RBI को कि इस बात को भी संज्ञान में लेना चाहिए, जिससे जो मिस सेलिंग एक बड़ी चिंता है जिसपे सर आप भी काफी आपने भी अपनी राय दी है, वित्त मंत्री ने भी उस पर चिंता जताई है, तो उसको आम लोगों को भरोसा दिया जा सकता है?
नहीं, बिल्कुल। देखिए 81 बॉन्ड का जहां तक प्रश्न है वो मामला अभी उच्चतम न्यायालय में लंबित है, तो उसके ऊपर में अब जब मामला विचाराधीन है तो कोई टिप्पणी करना उचित नहीं होगा। तो उसके बारे में मैं कुछ नहीं बोलना चाहूँगा। लेकिन मिस सेलिंग निश्चित रूप से हमने पहले भी कहा है, पुनः मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि हमारा सभी रेगुलेटेड एंटिटीज़ को, बैंक्स को ये निर्देश हैं, और सुपरविजन में भी जब वो जाते हैं तब भी इस बात का ध्यान रखा जाता है, देखा जाता है, ऑडिट किया जाता है कि क्या जो भी हमने नियम बनाए हैं, कानून बनाए हैं मिस सेलिंग के बारे में, जो वर्जित हमने किया है कि मिस सेलिंग में यदि बंडलिंग जैसे आपने कहा तो उस प्रकार की कोई कार्यवाही, उस प्रकार की कोई गतिविधि नहीं होनी चाहिए। ये हमारा सतत प्रयास रहा है। और उसी प्रकार से जैसे इंश्योरेंस है तो इंश्योरेंस के लिए IRDAI ने भी नियम उन्होंने भी लाए हैं कि कम से कम 3 प्रोडक्ट्स जो है 3 इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज इत्यादि का साथ में टाई अप होना चाहिए। तो सभी रेगुलेटर्स, रेगुलेटेड एंटिटीज़ के साथ में मिलकर के हमारा ये प्रयास रहेगा कि आगे आने वाले समय में और अधिक हम अपने नियमों को और अपने सुपरविजन को हम और सुदृढ़ करें, ताकि मिस सेलिंग की जो शिकायतें हैं, मिस सेलिंग जो फिर भी कुछ जगह पे होती है, वो और कम हो। और इस प्रकार के जो भी कोई मिस सेलिंग के हमारे पास में वाक़े सामने आते हैं, उनके विरुद्ध में हम लोग कठोर से कठोर कार्रवाई भी करते हैं और करते रहेंगे।
धन्यवाद सर। I will now invite Hitesh Vyas of Indian Express to ask his question.
Hi sir, good afternoon. I just want to check, is there any calculation being done on the impact on inflation in case currency fall by 1 rupee, and what that number would be?
No, we have our figures. I think 5% of depreciation leads to about 35 basis points of inflation, and on the other hand, it also helps exports and GDP growth by about 25 basis points.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite Ben Jose of the New Indian Express to ask his question.
Yes, sir. The question is again on the inflation impact. You have revised down by 60 basis points.
Sorry?
Inflation is forecast for 2% for the year.
Right.
Do you expect the rupee to improve, or you have factored in at 2%, you have factored in the impact of the rupee at say 90 or what? What is the assessment of that?
Yeah, we have factored in, the current levels of rupee in our estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll now request Mr. Mahesh Naik of Financial Express to ask his question.
Thank you very much, sir. Just earlier in April, you mentioned that you are comfortable with the system liquidity of 1% of NDTL. In the last quarter, we haven't seen on an average, which is below that level. Are you still comfortable, or have you changed your view? And if yes, please explain. And if you are still maintaining any projections until March for infusing internal guidance for infusing liquidity into the system?
See, as long as monetary policy, monetary transmission is happening, especially at a time when it is happening, I want to again reiterate that we will provide sufficient liquidity so that the monetary policy transmission happens. Otherwise, and so that's why it is a little surplus. It's on the higher side. Otherwise, you do not need so much of a liquidity. Perhaps you need to only, perhaps you can do with lower than the kind of liquidity that we have been providing as of now, which is not of the order of 1%, but which has been, of the order of between 0.6 and 1% or so, right? And sometimes going above also 1%. I think with this 1.5 lakh, almost 1.5 lakh, it will go beyond 1%. It will go beyond 1%. So that's the range, that we are looking at. I don't think the exact number should make too much of a difference, 0.5 or 1 or 6.6. The important thing is that we will provide sufficient liquidity to the extent it is needed for the banks to provide reserves. Why is liquidity needed? It is needed primarily to provide banking reserves to the Reserve Bank of India. It depletes because of currency in circulation, because when you give currency, you take the deposits. To that extent, the deposits reduce, currency increases. Or, when you do a forex, if you sell dollars, you take out from the banks those deposits, so their liquidity, the amount that they can keep towards the banking reserves. Or otherwise, it changes because of the banking reserve requirements, changes in banking reserve requirements because of higher deposits, etc. So the banking liquidity is, as of now, sufficient, and we continue to maintain
with your due permission,
ample liquidity.
With your due permission,
I would not say, that I am targeting, a particular level of 1%, etc. I am only giving you the confidence to the system, to the banking community, that there will be ample liquidity, especially as long as we are in this phase where the interest rates have to go down, right?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll take some more questions from this side. I'll now invite Aryan Khanna of Inforus Media to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Governor, you've spoken a lot about liquidity already. Just something on the nitty-gritties of it. In November, the RBI bought bonds in the secondary market. The market speculates was tied to the maturity of a GSEC at that time. Is this going to be the RBI's policy going forward as well? And then would you also consider it in the OMOs to come to add longer term bonds than 15 years, which has typically been the cap that you've held so far in the current year, and or state bonds if you want to add that to your OMO listing? On a related note on the liquidity management framework, there's been only one auction under the new liquidity management framework of 7 days. The 7-day operation is now the primary operation under the new liquidity management framework. So any comments on that going forward?
So your second question, let me take your second question. So in the new liquidity management, our effort primarily is to keep the operating target, which is the Walker, at the policy repo rate. And so therefore, we have now, the flexibility in the new liquidity framework to do a 1 day overnight, to do a 3 day, 7 day, depending on, the liquidity conditions that we foresee. And accordingly, those VRR and VRRR operations are done. Your first question related to the tenors of the GSEC OMOs that we will do. You will come to know shortly. You will come to know. It's a matter of few hours. We will put it out. We'll put it out. Thirdly, I would also like to mention that it has been our endeavor that we give out a diversified, balanced OMO, a balanced, supply of government bonds in various maturity periods, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, depending on the needs of the economy and the demand thereof. Previously, in the first half, over the years, of course, the average maturity has increased. The average maturity has increased. In the first half, there was perhaps an excess of the higher maturity, higher period GSEC auctions. And but going forward, I think that has been reduced. That calendar is also out with you. So we'll provide a balanced mix depending on what the demand of the economy is.
Sir,
SCL also will you buy?
SCL we will not be buying. Yeah.
So one part of my question was that the maturity of the bond that perhaps the RBI was holding is what the market estimates. Would you continue doing that? Would you buy bonds to replace maturing securities on your portfolio?
We'll be buying right now 1 lakh.
Correct.
Yeah. So
you have there's another maturity in January.
No. You are getting too ahead of times. I have already mentioned that we will provide sufficient liquidity. It is dependent, and I made it very clear in my speech, that it is for liquidity reasons that, we do OMOs and not for, any other reasons. Primarily, right? Primary reason is to provide liquidity, and depending on, the demand supply position, which are the securities we target. Going forward, it will again depend on what the liquidity needs are, and then we'll decide as to whether we need to do more OMOs or not.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Shama Mishra of Doordarshan to ask a question.
नमस्कार सर, माय क्वेश्चन इज ऑन ऑनलाइन फ्रॉड. यूजुअली हम देखते हैं कि प्रिवेंट करने के लिए तो बहुत सारे इसमें जो भी तरीके होते हैं, बट एक बार इंसान का, कोई व्यक्ति का पैसा जब चला जाता है तो बहुत कम उम्मीद होती है कि उसका पैसा वापस मिल सके. इवन व्हेन दे गो एंड कंप्लेन, बहुत जल्दी भी कंप्लेन करें तो भी. इस दिशा में क्या आरबीआई कोई कड़े कदम उठा रहा है?
सबसे पहले तो जो ये गंभीर विषय है आपने जो उठाया है, बहुत ही सामयिक विषय है और गंभीर विषय है. आरबीआई हर तरह से भरसक प्रयत्न कर रहा है कि सबसे पहले फ्रॉड न हो. उसके लिए कई कदम हमने, आरबीआई ने.
Priya added a hotel to her flight just because it had a floating breakfast. Expedia, made to travel.
हमने कई सारे किए हैं. जहाँ तक रिकवरी की बात है, आपका ये कहना बिल्कुल सही है कि रिकवरी, एक बार पैसा फ्रॉड होने पे और खोने के बाद में वो उसमें कम अंश ही मिल पाता है. ये मामला अभी हाल में जो है ये न्यायालयों में विचाराधीन है. कुछ जजमेंट्स आए हैं. केरला हाई कोर्ट का एक जजमेंट आया है जिसमें उन्होंने आरबीआई को कुछ निर्देश दिए हैं. फिर नागपुर बेंच, हाई कोर्ट महाराष्ट्र, उनका एक निर्णय आया है जिसमें उन्होंने भी कुछ निर्देश दिए हैं. और ये मामला अब सुप्रीम कोर्ट में, उच्चतम न्यायालय में विचाराधीन है, विशेषकर इस बात पर कि एक बार जब फ्रॉड हो जाता है तो उसका पैसा किस प्रकार से रिकवर किया जा सके. तो इसके ऊपर में सभी स्तरों के ऊपर में आरबीआई, न्यायालय, एमएचए सब मिलजुल करके किस प्रकार हम न केवल इसको रोकें, कम करें फ्रॉड्स को, बल्कि एक बार यदि पैसा चला जाता है तो उसकी हम रिकवरी किस प्रकार से जल्द सुनिश्चित करें. उस पर बहुत गंभीरता से आरबीआई में, सरकार में और उच्चतम न्यायालय में मामला विचाराधीन है. हमारा प्रयास रहेगा कि मिलजुल कर शीघ्र इस समस्या का हम समाधान निकालें.
धन्यवाद सर. I will now invite Subhana Sheikh of Mint to ask a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Governor. So I wanted to ask, our estimates on nominal GDP are far more accurate than our estimates on real GDP. And now with IMF also, they have graded India as C on their data quality on GDP. How does that make the RBI's assessment? What is your assessment say? How difficult does that make your job? And also, they have also reclassified India's de facto exchange regime from stabilized system to a crawl-like arrangement. What's your view on that? And sir, one last on transmission, I wanted to ask. There has been an increase in interest rates on new loans in October that shows that the transmission of rate cuts via banking system has reduced. So with the new rate cuts, do you expect an impact on transmission? And also, bond yields have relatively slowed down. The transmission on bond yields we haven't seen as much. So any view as to how this would evolve going forward?
So let me take your last two questions, and your first two questions on GDP and exchange rate. I'll ask my DG to come in. She deals with IMF more regularly, and our estimates. Although I believe that our estimates, GDP, inflation, GDP especially, which comes out, and CPI, which the MOSPI gives, they are fairly accurate. Of course, there is scope for improvement, but I'd leave that question including, the crawl-like exchange on DG Poonam Gupta. I'll answer your other two questions. You asked 3-4 questions in one, very smart of you. So interest rates, you said, have gone up. Lending side, vis-a-vis, I think you are comparing last 2 months' data. So as I also explained in my statement today, interest rate effect is now 79 basis points. But if the proportion of higher interest rate loans, like for example, retail loans which are unsecured, or gold loans, for example, because gold loans also, they are very high interest, they are higher interest rate loans. If their proportion goes up, the average interest rate goes up. It does not mean that transmission has slowed. Okay. The interest, so that's why, we are now giving, so the number for you, the number that you should be looking at is actually the interest rate effect, whether the interest rates have come down or not for different segments of loans. But all segments do not have the same interest rate. Housing loan may be, as low as 7.5% or 8%, whereas some of the unsecured loans may be, much higher, 10, 11%. If the share of those loans goes up going forward, then the average interest rate goes up, even though the interest rate on each and every segment of the loan has come down. I hope I was able to explain that point.
Yes, yes.
Second thing, bond yields. This has engaged the attention of everyone for a very, very long time. As I mentioned, first of all, the primary, target that we have is our operating target, and then, it transmits onto various other interest rates, including your bond yields. If you compare your bond yields now with the bond yields earlier and the spreads, they are more or less similar. They are not, the spreads are not higher. Please keep into account that when the policy repo rate will be lower, the spread will be higher. Please keep that into account. You cannot expect that the spread, what it was at 650, the same spread for a 10-year bond, to have the same spread as, at 550 or 525. So, but historically, if you look at what the spreads were, when our repo rate was 5.5, 5.2, 5.15, 5, etc., the bond yields today, or the spreads today, are not very different. They may on an average have been lower than they were earlier. This is one point, I want to clarify to everyone, because this keeps coming up. Perhaps why, this question keeps coming up is because they had gone down very low to about 625 or so, or 615, 617. Lata has all the numbers. So they had gone down, Why did they go down is a question that we all of us need to sit down and think. I think one major reason was that we did a lot of OMOs at that point of time. And so it is also a demand and supply thing. Ultimately, end of the day, it is, of course, your expectation of your policy rate path, long term. It's, of course, an expectation. That is one factor. But keep in mind also that it is primarily, ultimately, end of the day, it will be the demand and supply. And so, we had created that excess supply through these OMOs that we did, which pushed it down, which I would feel perhaps was lower than, otherwise they would have been. I mean, that can be one explanation for why, they had, apart from other things which have changed, over a period of time, apart from other things. That's not, that's not to say that's the only reason. Yeah, DG Gupta.
Thank you. Thanks for those two questions on the IMF. So first on the data quality issue.
We engaged with the IMF as a part of the Article 4 consultation, but also throughout the year. The point that they're making on what is perceived to be the quality of our statistics is a very limited one. They have a taxonomy based on whether the data provided to the IMF has some gaps which hampers the surveillance. It's not about the quality. Some gaps which hampers the surveillance. And when they looked at, based on this criterion, a number of data series for India, inflation, IIP, fiscal accounts, and national accounts. As per their taxonomy, they gave a taxonomy of A or B to most of the series and only a C to national accounts. And when one digs further into their footnotes, it's about the base revision. It's not about the quality of data, it's not about the sanctity of the numbers that are put out. It's about a base which has been perceived to be dated. With this revision, I think they would be satisfied on this count. On exchange rate, so again, what the IMF does and what others do is they put exchange rate regimes into 3 different categories: fixed, floating, and managed float. Only a handful of countries currently have a fixed exchange rate. Most of the advanced economies have a free float, and all the emerging markets have shades of floating, managed floats, and this is what India practices. Now, within the managed float, which is that RBI tries to curb undue volatility on each side of a reasonable level, IMF looked at the past 6 months of the data, and they found this volatility to be contained in a range that they have in mind. And based on that, they had a sub-classification which is called crawling peg. Again, I would not read much into it. It's just based on the cross-country comparison of India having this much volatility compared to some other countries. The fact remains that India is a managed float, just like most of the emerging markets are.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, madam. I will now request Krishna Kaushik of Financial Times to ask his question.
Great.
Okay, thank you. We'll now have some questions from the left side. I will now invite Lalatendu Mishra of The Hindu to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Governor. What has been the impact of the tariff on the economy, and if the trade relief measures have addressed certain concerns of the exporters? If you can please comment on that.
So, impact, as I said, I think I answered this earlier also, that ours is mostly, it's a minimal impact. It's not a very high impact because, ours is mostly a domestic demand-driven economy. Yeah, a few sectors, are certainly, impacted by it. You are aware of those sectors. And we have given out a relief package. The Government of India has also given out a relief package. I think this is an opportunity for us, and the exporters have already started looking out, improving not only their productivity, diversifying, etc. And we should be able to come out of this stronger going forward.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Riddhima Bhatnagar of Business Today to ask a question.
Thank you. Governor, my question to you is that RBI has flagged certain concerns about the personal unsecured personal loans. So what indicators are being seen as of now to combat that, and will there be any interventions by RBI on personal credit segment, retail credit segment?
I'll ask my DG Swaminathan. I think he looks into this more closely than me.
And my second question was on how's the retail CBDC shaping up? I know it's too.
I'll ask my other DG, Ravi Shankar on the left, to answer this if you don't mind.
Yeah. What are the parameters that we track in terms of any portfolio? One is the growth, year-on-year growth rate, and also its relative growth vis-a-vis the other segments. The point in time when we took some macroprudential measures on the unsecured loans was the time when that portfolio was growing almost twice as that of the rest of the portfolios. Currently, as you would know, the overall credit growth is around 11%. 10% is the large industries. Home loans are growing at 11%, personal loans are growing at 14%. And within which the growth has been seen more on the secured segments, like gold loans or home loans. Unsecured loans have significantly moderated. So there are no indicators at this point in time which are creating a concern for us. We also track the slippages that occur in the portfolio. Although there is a slight uptick in September quarter by about 8 basis points in the unsecured portfolio, overall retail loans have not shown any deterioration. And the third pointer is that the unsecured loans, if you are flagging it specifically, constitutes about less than 25% of the overall retail book. And as a percentage to the entire banking system credit, it's about 7-8%. So it's not a few bips, marginal uptick is not a matter of concern. So there are no measures that are planned at this point in time. And we will continue to keep monitoring this incoming data, and if there are some steps required, we will intervene. But at least I don't see a situation of something that requires a regulatory intervention at this point in time.
The retail CBDC is in good shape, thank you. There are, at this point in time, about a little more than 80 lakh users. The volume of transactions are approaching about 12 crore. The value, if I remember right, is about 28,000 odd crores. But more importantly than these, as I have told earlier, we are focusing on creating a unique use case or unique use cases for CBDC. From that point of view, we were focusing on programmability. There are many such programmable experiments and pilots, particularly in coordination with schemes, etc., of both the central government and state governments, as well as specific products of banks. They are under experimentation, a large number of them. Going forward, we are hoping that some of them will settle down and become in common use, acceptable to an average user. So that is largely the focus. The other focus is on getting cross-border arrangements in. So overall, it's proceeding as per expectations. Thank you.
Sir, 12 crore volume monthly or daily?
So far.
So far.
Thank you, sirs. I will now invite Ashish Agassi of Press Trust of India to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Governor, sir, in your statement, there is a mention of further reform moves by the government can help the growth process further. What would be the sort of RBI's asks or sort of expectations from further reforms? One. And secondly, sir, was there any discussion on the nominal growth part, sir? How does the MPC look at the nominal growth piece in the whole thing? And did it influence the rate call today?
No, we don't see. What the government has to do, it's already doing. So I don't, we don't have any, we do our job. We don't expect. But the government on its own, has taken up a number of reforms, some of which have already seen the day of light, labor, being one, which we saw recently. And so the reference was over there. There is no expectation on our side. So let me, clarify that. Your second question is nominal GDP. Nominal GDP.
कार इंश्योरेंस डन
पॉलिसी बाजार से कराया
नहीं
तो तू ज़ेब्रा नहीं हो सकता कार नई हो या पुरानी पॉलिसी बाजार पे कंपेयर करके खरीदो और 30,000 तक बचाओ इसलिए तू ज़ेब्रा तो नहीं है तू है
गधा
काइंड ऑफ
No. Governor, to reduce the stock of unclaimed deposits, which are around 67,000 crore,
the RBI came out with an accelerated payout scheme incentivizing banks to reduce that stock. How much of that stock has got reduced in the last 3 months?
I request DG Girish.
These unclaimed deposits, we have actually, if you look at, simultaneously government also came out with campaigning, and also from our side we have also incentivized banks. So result is clearly visible. If I have to give you some number, in October there is reduction of around 760 crore of unclaimed deposits from the DIA fund. And if you compare with that earlier experience, on an average around 100 to 150 crore was the net. So it's clearly visible. And going forward, we believe that it will further accelerate because we are putting lots of effort, both government and RBI side.
So sorry, this 100 and 150 crore is for what duration?
Monthly reduction in the unclaimed.
Okay.
And I may also add that we are also looking at the portal to improve that portal to make it more user friendly. So that will also further help in identifying the accounts, etc., and reclaiming the unclaimed assets.
Thank you, sir. We have 2 more media persons towards our right. I'll request Shri Bhim Singh from Dainik Bhaskar to ask his question.
इन्फ्लेशन पहले से 0.25% पर है और रेट कट का साइकिल भी चल रहा है, तो मेरा ये सवाल है कि आरबीआई किस हद तक लो इन्फ्लेशन को टॉलरेट कर सकता है? इकोनॉमिकली चैलेंजिंग
हमारे लिए जो टारगेट है, लक्ष्य हमारा 4% का है और जो बैंड है वो 2 से 6% का है। तो चूंकि अभी बहुत कम मुद्रास्फीति है, इन्फ्लेशन बहुत कम है और आने वाले समय में जैसा कि हमने अपने अनुमान दिए हैं अगले साल के लिए, उसमें भी काफ़ी कम है। 4% से जो कोर जो अंडरलाइंग इन्फ्लेशन है वो कम है। तो हमारा प्रयास है कि ये हम चाहेंगे कि इन्फ्लेशन लगभग 4% के आसपास रहे।
धन्यवाद सर। I will now request C. Prarthana from Akashvani to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Governor. There are concerns of some online lending apps misusing consumer data. So, is there a take? Is RBI doing something about it?
So already, we have, I can mention 2 and others can chip in, on some of the recent measures that we took. One is that we have now, a full regulation in place for digital lending and use of digital means by the banks and the regulated entities. The other is that we also came out with an app or a store which in a way, whitelists the various apps of the regulated entities. So that helps the people in coming to know as to which ones are actually regulated or not. But if there are other initiatives, I think, so I think these are the 2 major initiatives that we have taken in the recent past, and I think it has helped. These measures have helped, and we'll continuously be alert to further actions that may be required on our part. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There's no question from Nikkei. With your permission, sir, we will now conclude this press conference. I would like to thank you, sir, and our top management for patiently answering all the questions and for making this interaction so engaging and interactive. I also thank all members of the media for their participation and wish you all a pleasant day ahead. Thank you very much.
Sir, is there any timeline for the mis-selling guideline? Because in RBI annual report of FY25, you mentioned that the RBI will be coming up with the regulations on the mis-selling. So,
our conduct-related measures to a large extent take care of it. As I have mentioned, we have now set up a Regulatory review cell also, we are continuously reviewing our regulations, and this will also, be part of it. I cannot give you a timeline, but certainly, as I mentioned to you, these are.
भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं।